What does the doctor of tomorrow need to know? What does the doctor of tomorrow need to look like?
We want our students to be always seeing patients as people in need of healing, not people who are just diseases presenting to their office.
There's a lot of mental preparation, emotional preparation. You have to be able to help the patient in whatever situation they might be in.
It's a whole different ballgame.
Next, RX, Doctors of Tomorrow.
Funding for this program is provided by the Susan and Leonard Feinstein Foundation, the William and Phyllis Mack Family Foundation, Roy J. Zuckerberg Family Foundation, Primary Care Progress, and Harvard Medical School Center for Primary Care.
Rapid response to emergencies, the skillful use of sophisticated drugs and advanced technologies are the pride of our healthcare system and fundamental to a doctor's education. My father was a doctor, a general practitioner while I was growing up in the 50s. He spent his first years of medical school in the classroom. But the Hofstra North Shore LIJ School of Medicine has added another dimension to the medical school curriculum as they educate the doctors of tomorrow. Edom Seyul has just begun the arduous 4 years that will turn him into a doctor. In his very first week, he began training as an EMT and went out on the firing line.
We're going to take your blood pressure and get you fixed up, okay? Can you wiggle your toes?
It's hard to imagine one day you're like an undergrad and next thing you know you're here in medical school. Because you kind of think about it, you prepare yourself for the moment, and then you're finally there.
The school takes the traditional approach to the medical curriculum and stands it on its head.
The very first place that our students ever encounter patients in medical school is in the patient's own homes and in the patient's own communities, not in the medical space of a hospital or an emergency room or a doctor office, but in the patient space. We want them to be always seeing patients as people in need of healing, not people who are just diseases presenting to their office.
Raymond, how you doing, buddy? How you feel?
I wanted to be a physician for as long as I can remember. I have a picture of me when I was 4, and I was given a coat that said Dr. Sophie, and I had a plastic stethoscope. I've never imagined myself doing anything else.
Let's get some oxygen on her.
I'm going to drop the Benadryl?
Yeah, let's get her on oxygen first. 207 over 118. Your blood pressure's up a little bit, too. Don't worry. We're going to take care of everything for you, okay? Nothing's going to happen now.
What do you
Here's your 50 Benadryl right here.
So he can get it.
Almost.
Don't look.
Nana, what's your first name?
Julia.
Julia. I'm going to call you Julia instead of Nana.
Hold on.
It's what we've been learning at this school. You just have to be really patient and listen and know what's happening, talk to the people around them, and gain their trust. There's a lot of preparation that you have to do, mental preparation, emotional preparation. When you get there, you have to be able to respond quickly and help the patient in whatever situation they might be in. And it's often probably not one of the best days of their lives.
This is a chance for you to start this process of observation. All these people or their families donated their bodies for us to learn from. So this is a really special experience. It may be an emotional experience for you. And at any time, if you feel like you need to step out, that's okay.
It's a very different experience than most students have when they're first exposed to a cadaver. In most traditional medical schools, the cadaver is on their belly, the head and the hands and feet are covered. It's a very impersonal first exposure. And the idea here is to fully expose the students to the cadaver as a person.
I was a little nervous. So many people are afraid of death. So being just right up, you can't deny the cadaver in front of you is no longer living. And it's sort of, you have to face all of those fears.
I've always wanted to go into medicine, and I guess I always thought it would be easier to handle, but it's emotional. You think like that could be me.
The donors that we have in our lab are people. They have lives. And it's a very unique opportunity to be able to look at that life from both an emotional perspective and then add in the scientific perspective.
Oh, make some perpendicular marks.
When you first unveiled it, there was this moment where you had to just take it all in for a second. It seemed kind of surreal, you know? It's hard balancing your emotions and everything that comes with working with a human body. To not only be, I think, conscious of the things that are going on in the patients, but also some of the changes and stuff that are occurring in you.
For many of us, myself included, it was the first time seeing a dead person. We learned the donor's name and age, and this connection to the past in his life changed things for me. I was a little bit afraid to touch Perome at first, not because I was disgusted or afraid to feel the unnatural sensation of cold stiffness, but because it felt so intimate and personal. I was afraid that it was a violation of his personal space or dignity. But I realized that he donated... he donated his body for our benefit, and that I should take full advantage of the privilege in the most respectful way that I can. I'm incredibly excited to continue my exploration of the human body with Perome's help. He has so many interesting features that will give us some idea of his story. I am very thankful to have this experience.
Dr. Rennie had told the entering class to remember who these patients were. And to respect them as donors. Not just cadavers or anatomical specimens. I couldn't help but wonder, therefore, about the lives that these donors had had before they came to us, and about what drove him and or his family to donate his body for our study. I also wondered about his family and the loved ones, many of whom are presumably alive and missing the donor. And how they would feel about the lessons that he would serve us through. What I felt the most was a very deep sense of gratefulness and gratitude. The privilege of having access to this great and final gift is something that I hope I never take for granted.
What an interesting and diverse group of comments, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
I'm going to end this with mine. A group of 7 students gathered around Perome, quietly resting under his shroud, an undiscovered country of physical, personal, and emotional connections that make him wholly unique. The shroud is peeled back, and as Perome comes into view, I realize I now have 8 patients to diagnose at once. Having not seen him before, my clinical curiosity gets the better of me at first, as I quickly scan his face and body for clues. But just as quickly, I come to myself and turn my gaze to the other patients under my care, the students. They're quiet. They stare, not knowing where to start. And I let them find their own way, determined to complete a task that calls on their ability to be somehow engaged with Perome and in some way detached at the same time. It is a dichotomy they will face the rest of their professional lives. Perome now speaks to me in the ways I have become accustomed to hearing. a left-handed diabetic with coronary artery disease, sick sinus syndrome, peripheral vascular disease, prostate cancer, and chemotherapy. But no one has these kinds of problems and survives and carries on and thrives without tremendous support from many sources. He must have been well cared for and loved by his friends and family, and that helped carry him through all he experienced in life. And I wondered if they got to say goodbye to him, and if Perome's picture still sits on someone's mantle as a remembrance of a life well lived. For now, Perome, we're partners, collaborators. We both have very much to tell these students who so bravely took your shroud away. What do you say, my friend? Let's get to work.
Cody Milhouse's mother has brought her son to the pediatrician today because she has an uneasy feeling that something is just not right. Cody is usually an active 14-year-old who normally plays soccer on a travel team. But for the last 2 weeks or so, he has grown progressively more fatigued and has been having aches and pains, particularly in the legs. Miss Milhouse thinks Cody looks pale and seems to be bruising more easily.
So we have a hematology report here. We have a white blood cell count that's high, red blood cell count that is low. We have low neutrophils.
Like any medical school, students study the traditional medical sciences, anatomy, physiology, histology. But the student-led discussion remains focused on the patient.
What's important is for our students not only to amass a large amount of biomedical science, but for them to understand where that lives in a patient.
You need 10 to the 12th cells to make a diagnosis. What amount of cells do you need to say that the person is in remission?
I feel 10 to the 9.
I thought it was 10 to the 9 as well. But the remission, that's the hard part to tell the parent, because the parent may say, well, Cody's totally fine.
When my father went to medical school, he was pure memorization, straight up.
Yes.
Was it still that when you were going to school?
It certainly was. I used to tell my wife when I would come home that there was no difference between what I was doing in medical school and memorizing the New York phone book.
It doesn't fit today's society anymore. I mean, people know everything is on your phone. It's on your phone in an instant. You know, you stand even in the class here and you're doing an interactive session talking with the students. They're fact-checking you in real time. Raise their hand. They're not asking you a question. They want to let you know that statistic you just said, that's actually outdated by 4 minutes. I mean, it's a whole different ballgame.
All right, you come from the front, grab both of her wrists. There you go.
It got pretty real sometimes. If a victim was particularly good at acting their part, it was hard to ignore that.
New York City firemen rehearse for potential catastrophes over and over, following real-life scenarios. Working alongside them, students have the opportunity to learn from experts how to face disaster.
It's hard to prepare for that kind of situation. Every time I ride the subway, I think about it. But now I would know what to do if something were to happen. The firemen were very serious.
Come on, some of you guys got to...
It was a very intense drill. He was like, what are you going to do next?
You ain't got a BP. There's so many people here and nobody got a BP or accident. He's still bleeding, still bleeding.
Plus, there was blaring music. There was a sense of urgency. We had to work very quickly.
Bombs going off, chaos, firefighters teaching students. What are the students getting out of this?
What do they get out of that that's really important? That the people who care for patients, who have enormous ability and a lot to teach, encompass far more than just doctors.
ABC.
And they're all members of a team. Rarely is it just one person being the solo perfect fighter pilot who never makes an error. It's really about the system and the team working well that delivers that promise of excellence every time a patient comes in.
Get it down! down there and start pumping some air in his damn lungs. What he's got? Good.
Is there any part of you that wants to be a hero?
There's always, I guess, maybe there's a little part of it, but there's always going to be things that you can't do well or things that you're not as good at. And so if someone else is better at that, then why not use that, you know? Use every resource that you have.
Pleasure to see you again.
A pleasure to see you again as well.
May I sit?
Absolutely.
The curriculum emphasizes the rapport between patient and doctor. The professors say they can teach it, putting the student in an examining room with an actor playing a patient, and then critiquing the student performance.
Bedside manner. My father just had that.
That's right.
How can you teach that?
Oh, you absolutely can teach it because there are skills behind the bedside manner.
So you had the ultra screen test, that's correct?
Yes.
We had some concerns. The results of the test show there is an increased risk for trisomy 21, which is Down syndrome.
Oh my goodness. I can't believe this.
Everyone would say a doctor should be empathetic, but the question is how do you express empathy? Maybe I could offer just see if this helps. I promise you, Dr. Brenner and I are going to be back in here, and we're going to be there to answer all of your questions. Okay. My job right now, I want to really understand what you're thinking, and I promise you that we're in this together. Okay? Did that feel any better to you?
Yes, that feels much better.
You have to establish a rapport to figure out how you can best help the person who's coming to you. If I don't establish that relationship with you, then you won't trust me. And then you may not want to tell me certain things because you might think I might judge you, let's say, right? So maybe you don't want to tell me that I don't have money to buy the food that you just said I need to eat every time I have to take this pill, otherwise I'll get an upset stomach. I just say, okay, doctor, and I take the prescription, and I had never have any intention of taking the medication.
The patient's not going to know whether you're the smartest nephrologist or rheumatologist, but they're surely going to know whether you actually care that they get better or not.
And does that help them get better?
Sure, because then they trust you. And when they trust you, all kinds of good things happen. Like they follow your advice.
I just recently found out that I'm pregnant.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, this is going to be your first pregnancy?
Yes.
That must be very exciting. So how's preparing for that then? They teach us a lot about social skills and communication skills and building rapport with your patient. But I'm excited for next week, starting to work with actual patients and seeing how you get to really see how that component really translates more than just what you've learned in the classroom. So what brings you in here today?
Well, normally Dr. Markowitz is my internist, and this past week I fell in the city, so I had some bruises and some difficulty. So I came to see Dr. Markowitz just to make sure that I'm in good shape.
So with that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look at him. There are things that you have to prepare yourself for when you're looking at a patient. Look at the person in front of you. It's a human element. You want to be able to appreciate who he is. He's coming here for you, not for an EKG machine. I often think of diseases by the people I've treated, not necessarily the books that I have read. You don't think of diabetes as a problem with digestion of glucose. You see it as Mr. Smith. When you see high blood pressure, you don't think of it as, well, the heart is working harder and therefore the heart can enlarge. You think of this as Mrs. Jones.
I was laid off from my position at Bank of America the end of August, and it hit me very hard. I was concerned about ever working again because of my age, and so I would wake up every morning with a sense of panic, and I came in for a checkup with Dr. Markowitz. I felt so defeated. You know, I worked for 40 years, and for someone to just say, today's your last day, and after having performed at a very high level, received special achievement awards, always been praised by managers, to just be told that. And I think talking to Dr. Markowitz, he really helped me. Just having that conversation, the things that he said to me, I just felt a lot better.
This is, I think, a very good case of life itself coming in to your office. Not just the diseases that you may see, but the turmoil of society. Scott's case really does reinforce what it's like, especially to be a community doctor. Sometimes it's just being an ear, just listening to people because they have nobody or nowhere else to go. They just feel like the world has shut them out. They just want an ear. They want somebody who can hear them, hear their cries, hear their screams, hear their tears, whoever it may be. And that's extremely important. Let's talk quickly about smoking. We've discussed this many times. So we all know the harmful effects of smoking. And I say that in front of Mr. Richards not to make him feel bad, but it's important that you keep bringing it up. Smoking is an addiction, and treating any type of addiction starts with a person saying, I want to quit. So the first thing you're going to want to say is, do you want to quit? Are you ready for this?
So here's the question. Dr. Markowitz had some good advice to you about smoking. Why haven't you taken that advice?
I would say, I mean, we have spoken about it many times. And I've tried, I think, once or twice to quit. And I went along for about a month, and I went back to it. And, you know, I've used it as a crutch. But last night I was visiting my granddaughter, and she took a pack of cigarettes out of my vest pocket. And she said, Pappy, no smoking in house. This kid is not even 3 yet, okay? And if she knows it, then I better learn it immediately. And for her sake, I want to walk her down the aisle. It's that simple. When she gets married.
So how does a doctor, and someday Adam will be a doctor, work with the patient? Because it's up to you.
I think it's persistence, especially Dr. Richard has been on my case, and he doesn't let go. And I don't put him down for that because I like that he cares.
I tell patients that dying is bad for business. So that's important. I really don't care about him. I care about my business.
Without a doubt, it's going to kill you. But like I said, it's bad for his business, and I'd like to see him do well.
So if you had to say in 2 sentences, what is it that you want Adam to understand about medicine?
No matter how many pills, no matter how many injections, no matter how many different things that come up, you still have to relay that to a person.
So this other dimension, the human dimension, is it surprising you how critical that is?
What he told me the first day when I came in is, you know, don't worry so much about the medicine aspect. That's not really what you're here. You're going to pick that up. But I really want you to pay attention to the human part. Go in, just develop the sense of, you know, getting an idea of being able to read a patient, be able to see, do they seem normal, what seems troubling with them, and just being able to read all those sort of nonverbal cues that go off to, I think, being a good physician.
What does the doctor of tomorrow need to know? What does the doctor of tomorrow need to look like?
Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself as well, just to get like a typical day in your life?
We need doctors who can establish rapport with patients, who can communicate, who can work in teams. We need doctors who can think, who can deal with all of the information out there. How do we share that then with patients to help advise them? And how do we do it in a way that doesn't cause us to call 1 million consults and order 100 tests, which is going to, you know, put the healthcare system out of business?
So you're going to train your students with these kinds of values. Then you want your students to get out there and help to fix a broken medical system.
Absolutely. They cannot be bystanders and they cannot ignore the problem. It's not going away. They have to engage.
You want to use the sensitive part of your fingers.
They're going to go into a healthcare system that costs too much, isn't organized well enough to deliver smooth, continuous, organized care for patients, but at the same time can do more to change the course of human disease than ever before in history. So, you know, on one hand, it's broken or maybe discombobulated is a better way to put it. But on the other hand, they're going to go out with tools to make people healthy like no physicians in history ever had.
See, I'm keeping them about 1 centimeter from each other, taking about 1 centimeter each.
My father had the bedside manner, but he didn't have a lot of tools.
He didn't have those tools, right. He held hands a lot of time.
And that was effective. But it wasn't as effective as he could have been if he had what doctors have today.
Absolutely.
So it's as if you're going back to the future.
It's a little bit of both. You don't want to destroy what was great in the old way. You want to augment it with things that are better.
Here we go. Here's a little girl out of here.
It's all right. It's all right.
Funding for this program is provided by the Susan and Leonard Feinstein Foundation, the William and Phyllis Mack Family Foundation, Roy J. Zuckerberg Family Foundation, Primary Care Progress, and Harvard Medical School Center for Primary Care.